Welcome to the Explainer. So, how on earth can an old joke from Sigmund Freud, of all people, help us understand the hidden logic behind the 2003 invasion of Iraq? It sounds kind of wild, right? Well, that's exactly the provocative argument made by philosopher Slavoj Žižek, and that's what we're going to unpack today.
All right, let's dive right in. We're going to start by going back to a really simple question that, at the time, had a surprisingly complicated and, well, a constantly changing set of answers.
The official reasons for the invasion just seemed to keep shifting. It created this incredibly confusing picture, not just for the public, but really for the entire world watching.
So, first it was all about weapons of mass destruction. That was the big one. But then, when those WMDs never turned up, the story kind of switched. Suddenly, it was about Saddam Hussein's supposed links to al-Qaeda. And when that connection didn't really hold up, well, the reasoning pivoted again, this time to the moral high ground, liberating the Iraqi people from a brutal dictator. It was like every time one justification crumbled, a brand new one just popped up to take its place.
It's a total mess of contradictions, isn't it? But according to Žižek, this confusing logic isn't a mistake, it's actually a feature. He argues that the very structure of these contradictory excuses, well, it reveals a deeper truth about what was really motivating the war.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because its old Freudian joke, of all things, perfectly illustrates the specific kind of flawed reasoning Žižek saw in the whole case for war.
Okay, so the joke itself is super simple. Picture this. A man is accused of returning a kettle he borrowed, but it's damaged. So he gives 3 excuses. First, he goes, "I never even borrowed a kettle from you." Then he says, "And besides, the kettle was totally fine when I gave it back." And for his grand finale, he argues, "And anyway, it was already broken when I borrowed it." You see the problem, right? They completely contradict each other. I mean, if you never borrowed it, how could you return it in good condition? The punchline here is that by offering all these conflicting excuses, he basically just admits he's guilty.
So, a silly joke about a kettle and a massive geopolitical conflict. How do they connect? Well, Žižek argues that this exact same self-defeating logic was at play in the official justifications for the war.
This right here illustrates the parallel perfectly. The first big claim, Saddam has WMDs, is just like saying, "I never borrowed the kettle." When that falls apart, the story changes to, okay, no WMDs, but he's linked to al-Qaeda, which is just like saying, "The kettle was fine when I returned it." And the final argument, well, there's no link, but he's a brutal dictator, that mirrors the excuse, "The kettle was already broken." Žižek's point is that each new justification basically admits the last one was bogus.
So the crucial point for Žižek is this overload of reasons, this desperate scramble for any justification that might possibly stick. It's a huge signal that none of them were the real reason. The inconsistency itself is what points to a hidden motive.
And that leads us to a really important question. If all the public reasons were just a smokescreen, what was the actual driver of the conflict? To get at this, Žižek takes us to the world of cinema.
He borrows a concept from the master of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock, the MacGuffin. Now, in a Hitchcock movie, a MacGuffin is that thing everyone in the story is chasing. The secret plans, the hidden diamonds. But what it actually is doesn't really matter. It just exists to get the plot rolling.
And he argues the WMDs were the perfect MacGuffin. The frantic search for them, the threat they supposedly posed, that was all that was needed to set the whole plot of the war in motion. Whether they were really there or not was, in a way, completely beside the point.
So, if the WMDs and all the other public reasons were just the MacGuffin, what were the real drivers of the war? Žižek suggests it wasn't just one single thing, but actually a powerful combination of 3 different motives, all happening at the same time.
So first he says there was a sincere ideological motive, a genuine belief in spreading democracy and liberating people. Second, there was a geopolitical motive, the need to just brutally assert and demonstrate American power on the world stage. And third, a pretty straightforward economic motive, securing control over Iraq's massive oil reserves. For Žižek, it was these 3 things working together that created this unstoppable momentum for war.
And this brings us to what might be Žižek's most powerful and provocative idea of all. It's a brilliant little twist on a very famous political phrase.
I'm sure we all remember this quote from the Secretary of Defense at the time, Donald Rumsfeld. He was trying to explain the complexities of intelligence, right? Breaking it down into what we know we don't know, and the stuff we don't even know we don't know.
But Žižek's argument is that the most critical category of all was left out. He says Rumsfeld completely missed the one that truly explains why we do things that go against our own stated beliefs.
And this is what Žižek calls the unknown knowns. Think about that for a second. These are the things we kind of deep down know are true. You know, those uncomfortable truths, the real motives, like a desire for geopolitical power or economic gain, that we just don't want to admit, even to ourselves. So we actively pretend we don't know them. They become these unspoken assumptions that are secretly guiding our actions from behind the scenes. For Žižek, this is basically the Freudian unconscious playing out on a massive political stage.
So at the end of the day, Žižek's whole borrowed kettle idea isn't really just about one specific war. It's like a lens, a really powerful tool for looking beyond the official stories we're always being told. It forces us to ask a much bigger and, frankly, a much more uncomfortable question. What are the unknown knowns, the things we pretend not to know, that are secretly shaping our world right now?